Okay, we have with us today Minister Sukhara Yahweh, who's formerly known as Sweet Willie Wine, who is an activist and was a very extreme, I should say, activist back in the 60s, 70s, when he was actually on the street sacrificing his life to advance the cause of African American people in Memphis, Tennessee. I would like to thank you for entertaining and accepting my invitation for an interview. I've been wanting to do this for many years, and now the time has arrived and we're here, and we're interested in hearing your story. The first question that I'd like to ask you is, where were you born, your birthday, your brothers and sisters, your family, your father and mother lived, and their names?
Okay. I was born in the area called the Beltline, which is out by Orange Mountain. The Beltline, of course, is across the track, and the Beltline is called the Beltline because that was the railroad, the Beltline Railroad. So I was born on the north side of the track, and then we moved on Corn Street on the other side of the track, right in the area, around the area where they had what is called the Brown Derby. That was the favorite hangout place or club or cafe during that period that people did, so that was the area. And then from there we moved to 4th and Beale in that general area. Right, the back of the property that we lived in was adjacent to the church's farm, and of course, being only a few yards, 50 or 60 yards from Beale Street, 839, you can imagine that Beale Street was Beale Street during that time. And of course, I was adopted by my uncle and aunt. My uncle was the son of, his name was the son of B.S. Booth, who was out of Will's attorney, and his name was Lance Brown. So I didn't have a first name, and they gave me, of course, my uncle's name, which was Lance Watson. My mother, of course, her name was Rowena Watson. Some say it may have been Green. And of course, during the time we were staying on 4th Street, of course, I was staying with my grandmother and my step-grandfather at the time. And my mother came in too. We had just a small room. And of course, we stayed with them. After I was adopted, of course, by my uncle, we moved to Dixie Heights, on Dixie Street to be exact. And of course, growing up in that area was a whole different type of area. There was a lot of love in Dixie Heights. I went to Hamilton High School. I started at Hamilton in 1945. And I was in the first grade one day because my aunt had taught me how to read before I even got to the first grade. My aunt was the domestic worker for the Brown family. The Brown family is the family out of which came Federal Judge Bailey Brown. And Federal Judge Bailey Brown was the one that issued the injunction to prevent Dr. King from marching. Well, she raised him because most domestic workers are just as kind to those children that grew up under domestic care as they are their own care. That was just their nature during that time. And so therefore she seen how Bailey was developing because he had told her when he was a child that he was going to be a lawyer, and she already seen how he was developing. So therefore she would come home and begin to teach me, give me toys and puzzles and things to put together to help develop my mind. And I was blessed also too because a lot of the things that were given to us by the Brown family caused me to have appreciation for things such as I can remember that I had to wash dishes. And at an early age, I learned how to wash dishes, which I did not know at the time, but that was good because I understood how to work and take care of myself at an early age, and that was being done. And you can see it now, and children don't have any information whatsoever, don't know how to do it.
Before we get into that, I would like to ask you about your father. Okay. Who was your father?
My father, I never did see my father. And of course, I know I made a statement once that I was in Mayor Henry Lowe's office. And the time I was in his office, it was during the time that the sanitation strike and all that was going on. And Mayor Lowe's had a shotgun up on his desk. You know, he kept a shotgun during that period. So what I did was to keep the fear of the mayor from being in the minds of the children. I got some children and took them down to the mayor's office. He would always open the door and let me in and talk. And so that they wouldn't have that fear. And the question came up, and I mentioned, I said, well, I haven't seen my daddy, I don't know my daddy. I said, but one thing, whoever is my daddy, I love him. And that was the statement I made there in the mayor's office about my daddy. This is a situation that some of those children sitting there also made people into, and they saw how I spoke up for my daddy.
Tell us about your high school experience. Did you go to college? And these types of things, academic background.
Yeah. Well, you know, as I said to you, my aunt stimulated reading and all of that. Even today, I read paper and books. It's what you find around me, research around that. Of course, I went to Hamilton, and I had we had good teachers doing those good teachers. We had good teachers during that period. Mr. Buckley was the principal. Of course, later on, Harry Cash became the principal, who lived over on the Parkway, who taught the young men how to box and the whole bit. And of course, I left Hamilton. Thankfully, I passed the 9th grade and I left Hamilton. What happened was, I had grown older, and my uncle, I remember the time well. My uncle had contacted Athletic Feed, and he told me to go to the store for him to get some absorbing union. And so my partner, who was the same age, James Fleming, who lived across the street, we were walking together. Well, I didn't rush to the store. I mean, we casually walked along and talked, and we was walking, coming back. You know, when we got back near the house, my uncle was upset. I guess I didn't go fast enough. So he snatched the limb off of a peach tree and he hit me with it. Of course, I had been getting disciplines, but I wasn't a bad child. So I had certain disciplines I would get. But when he hit me with this tree limb, and I had got to be 16 then. And when he hit me, I still didn't run. I just kept walking on to the house. Then after he got in the house, he was going to try to, discipline me again with a strap or whatever. And then I guess it dawned on me, I'm 16 years old, and so he said, well, what you do, you call your mama. So my mother came and got me, and that's how I moved downtown. I'm 16 years old, that's how I moved downtown, and that's how I left Hamilton. So once moving downtown, downtown meaning Georgia, Shukhara in Georgia, I went to Booker T. Washington, so that was the 9th grade. So I went to Booker T. Washington 1 year, and then I left, and my mother signed the paper so I could go into the Army. So I went in and joined the Army. Took my basic over in Camp Chaffee, Arkansas, and I signed up for the parachute with 11 Airborne. But I never did jump because seeing all the people coming out jumping and seeing them screaming, the chute door open and all of that, when it came time for me to jump, I told them, no, I don't think I'm going to. So they gave me a general discharge on 100 conditions, so I still was able to get the same thing. And then as time went on, of course, we're talking about education. I had got involved in the movement. I had went to D.C. and all of that, and I came back and I had some time. And I guess I was in my 40s or 50s. But I had a period there, and I said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Lemoyne College. And so what I did, I went and took my GED in April. And the government gave me my papers, and I enrolled in Lemoyne College that September. And that January, I was in Washington, D.C. With Stevie Wonder. What happened was, of course, political science is my major. And so what I had to do was, I had practice, but I didn't have all the theory that I needed as it relates to what I was doing. So when I went to Lemoyne and began to get off into political science and sociology, then I was beginning to pull in theory, and then I could see what I was doing and how it fit into it. And when I began to do it, then I can define it according to the language used to define the subject matter.
What was your religious persuasion? How did you evolve in religion?
Oh, yeah. Well, as I said, I grew up in the Church of God in Christ. Okay, my aunt was known in the Church of God in Christ. Bishop Mason and Bishop McEwen, who lived on Park where he was living, his church was out on Main Avenue, so she attended that church. And then there was a sanctified church, as it is called, at Pillar and Dixie. That's when I lived on, which is right on the corner there, on Pillar and Dixie. Well, that was Pillar Church of God in Christ. James L. Rogers was a pastor, but that was the church that I attended. Well, because I could read. She taught me how to read her, and I was in first grade, as I said, one day, because I could read and know all ABCs and everything, because she's there with Judge Brown teaching him, so she made sure I got the information as well, and advanced. And so, I grew up with that knowledge, okay? And of course I began to study religion, but not as a discipline, but just reading, because I had been introduced to the field of religion as it was the Church of God in Christ. You know, I've always understood it. And so I began then to study different religions as these times moved on. Now what happened when I went to penitentiary the second time, then that is when I really got involved in studying religion and everything else, because then the civil rights movement was going on, and I become infected in the prison with the civil rights movement and stuff that come out. And so I started changing the prison, started to build schools, build churches. They were moving me around because I was organizing the prisoners, and they kept moving me around to keep the prisoners from beginning to understand what I'm doing in the whole bit of beginning to gain power. Of course, I was able to get Jay Blackfoot, who was in prison. I was able to take the prisoners out with a guard named Brother Ed, who didn't even have a gun. Some of these prisoners had life sentences. We would go to other institutions to put on shows. Blackfoot was one of the brothers. He had, I remember years growing up around Blackfoot that they always talk about Blackfoot was a Pikeville. Well, hearing about Blackfoot was like you could go to the foot-on office all the time, garden office. So I knew about Blackfoot. So when Blackfoot showed up in the prison, of course, automatically I gravitated around it. And I told him, I said, Blackfoot, don't ever come back in here anymore. And so each time you see me, even up to he died, he always told me, so you told me to come back, and I didn't come back, I didn't go back, you know. So then the information I got as it relates to the college, as it relates to the politics and the whole bit, I was able then to go to Washington, D.C. that January 15, because Stevie Wonder had asked us to come to Washington to help push for the Martin Luther King birthday. So with me having gotten that information at Lemoyne as it relates to how to set up a lobby, I went to Washington, and after the march, I stayed in Washington, because I'd been living there off and on over for years. So I stayed in Washington, and I set up a lobbying committee both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. So I started lobbying for the Dr. Martin Luther King birthday bill. Well, what happened was At that time, Carter was going out, and Reagan was coming in. I can remember watching the changeover and swearing in, and of course going out to the, had seen that many times. But long story short on that, Reagan did sign the Dr. Martin Luther King holiday bill. That's how that come to. So that's what happened with my education as it relates to high school, the GED, and then get the year or a couple of semesters, so I could hone my political and social knowledge.
I also have heard that you were affiliated with the Muslim community at one time, or you are.
Yeah, and then we were talking about religion. Again, as I said, I studied all religion. I studied it all. Of course, when I was in prison, then that gave me plenty of time to study. And under my bed, I had books. I even wrote a novel while I was in prison. Yeah, I had books all over up under my bed, and that's all I did, and got it on the yard and debated, because you have good minds from everywhere in prison. And at the time I was learning, and I was very enthused because I was learning. And one time I was loud and wrong, and my cell buddy said, well, if you be loud, make sure you're right. And that always stuck to me. Yes, even in prison one time I can remember, because I was studying what Malcolm was saying, El-Amin was saying. And so what I did, I took one of the caps, took the bill off of it, and put a star and a moon crescent on my in prison. So of course, I had to come off to take that off. And also to the Caucasian prisoners, they was upset with me because I was getting things done in prison, and they was going to kill me. But just so happened the brothers in now heard about what they were going to do, and they know who to go to and told them, don't you mess with them. So that gave me what I needed. I had got the respect of the God. They would put me in the what we call the flat top. It was the death where the death chair was, and that was the death row. But they would also put you in there for discipline. Also, and it would be a place with hot concrete with a hole in the floor and hot concrete necking. And what they were trying to do, they were trying to break my spirit. So they put me in the prison, in the cell, and the guard would come in, check over. I said, well, listen, God, if you ain't going to take me out, don't come looking at me. I'm going to be all right. And don't bring me nothing. So I went off into my fast and meditated. Shoot, that Monday, they took me out, took me to the shower, put me some new clothes, and let me go out with the group outside the prison. So you see what they were trying to break me. They were trying to break my spirit, but they never did break me. They never did break me.
Tell us about what happened to you that caused you to get active in political struggle of the 60s and 70s.
What happened? It happened in prison. It happened in prison. As I say, I was studying and everything, and then I was being impacted, Stokely Carmichael and all of them coming to Tennessee State over the fist. Every time Stokely would leave, the city kept on fire, and that was going on all over because they would have rap around, get through talking, the city would catch on fire. And so that fire, and it was what I wanted to do. I could see it was the fulfillment of that which I had been looking for, okay? And I naturally began to gravitate in it because I started doing it. Those things that they were doing outside, I was doing it inside the prison, bringing about change. I integrated the prison. They moved me from the main prison where they had the guards and the barbed wire and the guns down to a lower, what is called a lower farm. That was just simply wire with concertina wire on the top of it, and you could escape if you wanted to. And they put me down there, and I integrated the cafeteria down there. They took me out of there, and then they sent me down to where it used to be an old women prison that didn't have the doors wasn't ever locked, there wasn't no fence, and I could walk off at a time, and that's where I stayed until they let me out of it.
How much time did you serve?
Altogether, I did about 4 years, 2 years each time. Okay. Okay. And so that's what got me involved into the movement. I started there, and then when I got out of prison, I didn't get right involved in the movement. Then I went to Gallatin, Tennessee, and Nashville because I had been around in that area. And then there was some brothers that was in prison that I had met that lived in the area. So I got out of prison, stayed in Nashville for a while. Even went to disc jockey school. Yeah, while I was in Nashville. Then one day I came to work to my class, and this guy who owned the building, the company, said to me, "I know where you're going. You're going to Memphis and you're pulling jobs off." And when he said that, I didn't go back no more, because then I could tell what was up, because he was getting paid, but what he was giving me in terms of class and all of that was not. So he didn't want me around, because I was seeing that he wasn't doing nothing. Okay, so I left because he wasn't away from me. And then I went to Gallatin, was on 30, 50 miles away from Nashville. So I went to Gallatin, started hanging out with the guys down there. Next thing I know, I'm shoplifting again, and I had got me a building, and we shooting craps, got a little crew up. And then I looked on television, and there was John Ferguson, and he was being beaten by the police, and I'm looking at him, and I said, "I'm finna go home, y'all. Y'all can have everything." And I even had a Mustang car. I gave everything away, caught the bus, and came home. When I got home, back to Memphis, I was going, because I hadn't been back in 3 years, so I'm walking around the community, talking to everybody, meeting everybody. I went down 4th Street in Vance. On the right-hand side was a beauty shop called Shop Mills Beauty Shop. Well, I had not seen those women in quite a while, and I used to shop there. I go down to the Three Sisters or Gurbles or whatever, and I knock off a $75 or $80 dress and sell it to them for $20, but I want to see them shop. It was a challenge. Dress out women like everybody else doing that period, because they couldn't even go in there and shop. They had goldsmiths, but they had to shop in the basement. Go ahead.
Let's deal with pre-Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and then we're going to discuss post-Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. era. Okay. As I can remember, the press center, the newspapers, was one of the newspapers in my family. My mother used to.
K. Black. Yeah, one of the writers. Go ahead.
And as I can remember, before Dr. King actually came to Memphis, there was an uproar among African American leaders to prevent him from coming to Memphis. Okay, they didn't want him. And I can remember my mother was telling me that it was either, I think it was Maxine Smith who was on the television saying that we don't need him to come to Memphis, we can solve our own problem. Okay, so that was a confusing period in Memphis, okay, for the citizens, for us, particularly African American people, black people. But I also remember your signature on those days as Sweet Willie Wine, and your signature as an activist during the Beale Street riots and things like that. Share some of that information with us. That's pre-Dr. Martin Luther King.
Yeah, well, I was going through some paperwork, and I had ran across an article that had been written, and I think this guy had wrote a book, an English book he had, that Maxine Smith, Jesse Turner, and Maxine's husband was reporting to the FBI about the actions of the militants. And I think she tried to sue the writer over it, but of course she lost. You're talking about controlling, those who control who. Okay. Even down to the time today. You're talking about a particular class that is designed for a particular purpose to protect a particular class from another class down at the bottom. So there's a buffer in between, so they can't get to you, and they carry out the orders of these up here. That's what they do. And of course, it's going on today. I think more so now, and it's more stronger now than it was back then, because back then it was so close to slavery, it never had collective struggle for the race, period. When you only had a few that was selling people out of money. You know, like now, it ain't even a thought no more. You see what I'm saying? So, yeah, you know, that's the right thing to do. You can see it got to that point.
To sell out.
Yeah, that's all part of it. Yeah, it's all part of it. Yeah. That's not that love and cohesiveness that we're today. So,
it makes me angry to hear that, you know, and to know it for a fact.
Yeah, well,
I'm just pissed off.
Yeah,
really angry.
Well, I could get angry as well, but understanding the way that I do understand, know how things are done, how nations are ran, how people are conditioned mentally, mind control. Once we begin to understand how the hierarchy of man can be manipulated and he will compromise his integrity, all of those things, you know. So I guess these 76 years have gotten me to the point that I have to understand the thing, because to seek wisdom and knowledge is most of all good understanding. So that's what I do. All behavior that's out there, I start off with the fact, well, this was a baby one day. Now what showed up in this baby's life from the time it was a baby to where it is, because a child is a reflection of the adult, and adult is a reflection of the society. So then, and I'll show you how you can do it real easily. Look at Malcolm and look at Martin. And, you know, that used to be a debate between the two. Who is right? I'm talking about in terms of us out the street. And I remember, I'm up in Chicago with my partner up there who lived in Chicago. We used to go to Chicago quite often. And I was going through a book, and there was a picture of Dr. King and Malcolm X shaking hands. And I said, I had never seen this before. So I got that book, and you begin to see this. And I got the book, got the picture made off of it, and began to circulate it all over the country, everywhere I went. Because something happened. What I did was, I began to reconcile Malcolm and Martin. I looked at where they came from. Malcolm's daddy was a Garvinite. Martin's daddy was a Baptist preacher. Two different perspectives. So they are reflected of the perspective they come from. But now once you look at them as men, well, both of those men are in me. I had a spirit of Malcolm and I had a spirit of Martin. Martin only did what he did. Martin picked up a gun at one time, but the only time that he spoke out about it and said anything about the gun, he said that we're going to use nonviolence as a tactic in order to achieve the social what we're looking for. That didn't mean he would shoot, that didn't mean none of that. You understand what I'm saying? So I had to reconcile. And once I reconcile that I would be this way, but if you make me be the other way, I'm also capable of that as well. So that's how I reconcile the two men and me. And Martin and Malcolm is in everybody. You know what I mean? So
you were the leader of the invaders at one time?
Yeah, well, it evolved. Yeah, Charles Cabbage.
And what was the invaders? What were they about?
Well, Charles Cabbage.
And what year was that?
We're talking about the 60s.
Okay.
I think the invaders began to evolve around 65, 66. Charles Cabbage was going to college in Atlanta. Spelman, I think it was. And then John Smith was gone. So Charles and John got together based on what was going on at that time. Cal, being a student and being around the students in Atlanta and all of that, then began to come forward and teach about the movement and the whole thing. That's how the invaders come about. Well, how I got involved with the invaders is that time I was coming back out of Nashville, where I just got out of prison, but I came back to Memphis. And I had been moving around in the city, and I was 2 blocks away. I was on Hernandez Street in Vance where Dr. King was shot. Of course, he was at the Rowan Hotel. And the move then was to fulfill Dr. King's project, which was Resurrection City, to bring the plight of the poor to the world. Okay, that was what. And the discussion was, before he was killed, the discussion that was going on at the Lorraine Civil Rights Hotel before he was shot was with Cal and some of the other brothers to agree to not be violent in Resurrection City and to help them keep down violence. That was the discussion. Cabinet agreed, and we were going to give cabinet some money to help the labor organization, and all of that, right? Well, that particular day that I was going by the beauty shop and everything, where I had been years before, shoplifting and blah, blah, blah. I went in, and the lady did a course in that city, and they said, they say that Dr. King might get shot. What must we do? I said, well, if we do, go home. And I walked down the Beale Street, talked to some people on Beale Street, up and down the Harlem House, and all during that period. And as I was coming back, I met a young lady, and she said, go get them, boys. And I said, go get them. And I looked at her, I said, what you talking about? And when I got back to the beauty shop at Vance and Hernanda, and walked in there, he said, Dr. King been shot. I said, well, go home. So they started laying towels out of here, and out the door they went. Well, then I'm out of it. I don't know that Dr. King's at the Lorraine Hotel. I'm thinking he's still over there at the Rivermont, because that's where he was at first, right? So I'm in the community and watching here in the news, cities burning, cities burning and all that's going on, right? A few things going on in the other. So I'm out in the street all night long. When I got home the next day, my grandma said, take off them clothes, you smell like gasoline. Yeah. So, one thing for sure, if it did smell like gasoline, she wasn't upset with me about it smelling like gasoline. But anyway, and so the days began to develop, and Miss King came back to Memphis, and that was the big march as it relates to that. And it got back down to organizing for what Dr. King had said, based on the poor people's campaign. And I told John Smith, I said, John, can I meet the Prime Minister of the invaders and be in charge of ensuring that there will be no violence in Resurrection City? He said, yeah, go ahead, you got that position. So I took that position, and as security, and we went to the March, Mississippi, got organized there. I was in charge of security in Resurrection City, which was nothing but 2 shanties with some plastic over it and an air mattress. That's what we stayed in, between the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial, right next to the reflection pool. That's where we stayed with all the people. And we were successful. We kept the violence down, of course. I was in the Washington Post, New York Times, Jet Magazine. That's on Today's Show with Barbara Walters, with Jesse Jackson, Jim Bevel, and other members, and so that's where when it took off. That's when everything took off. Of course, I came back to Memphis after that was over with, and then my brother invited me to come to Forest City to help him over to Forest City, which is the home of the group of where Nature Baptist Forest came out of. Well, over there in Forest City, in Arkansas, period, that same mentality was all across Arkansas. I think people were making $1.50 an hour, and no black folks in no position of power. So I went over, and the brother had heard about me and read about me in the news, so he asked me to come over 3 times. And I'm messing around down on Beale Street, down on Vance. Of course, I was in the movement, doing movement things, but also I wasn't doing everything I was supposed to be doing. Okay, well, I started dropping POs, you know what I mean? And which was direct contrary. Then got involved with a young lady by the name of May Helen, who was the sister of Big Sue. And she ended up stabbing me here, across here, and here. And of course I was on the critical list at the hospital. That was on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. When Solomon Jones, who told Dr. King on the Baptist, go get your coat, the undertaker said, go get your coat, Dr. King, it's cold. I said, it's cool. Well, he come at the foot of my bed and said, sweet, can I do anything for you? And I said, no, nurse, bring me some food. She said, well, I got to call your doctor. I said, call him, because I don't need no undertaker. So she called the doctor said, give him some food. He took me downstairs. And 3.5 days later, I'm up in the pulpit in Forest City organizing. And then after that, Winter Rockefeller got Brooks to call off a march against fear. not march in fear, but poor people's march that we were going to have from the Boot Hills of Missouri to the Little Rock. Rockefeller got him to call it off, so I knew that was a sellout. So I didn't want that. And we done worked all the summer organizing people all over Arkansas, telling them what we're going to do. But I don't believe in organizing people that do it to them. So I knew it was fear. So what I did was I called for, in the newspaper clip and said, Militant said he'll march in spite of. So and that's what happened. I had a walk against fear, and I started in West Memphis. And then some of the invaders joined me, and by the time we left the next morning, 50 miles from West Memphis to Forest City, we made the first leg. The next morning, there was TV cameras, troopers, and everything was there because the Ku Klux Klan said that we weren't going to make it, and they were going to kill us, especially me. And but that didn't stop. We got out the next day and we marched. We got to one area, Hazen, Arkansas. It's nothing but a swamp for 20 miles. And so they told me, get in the car, and we're gonna walk it. And so they walked it, I won't follow it. They walked it. And I went on down the highway and to see what was going on further down while they were walking. And there were some people standing at the stove looking down the highway the way I was supposed to come. So I get behind them looking down the highway. I said, what y'all looking for? They said, we waiting on that sweet Willie wine. I said, oh, okay. And then I went on down the car and it dawned on us, today is right there. And I went on down the highway. We came on back. What they had did, they had put 25 or 125 armed men in the city. They was armed and had put tractors and the carbines across the highway to stop us from getting there. When we got there, they had took the tractors down, they took the carbines down, but the men were still armed. And some young white children came and met us at the city limit. And me and a black woman and I marched through the city. She was reading the 23rd Psalm. They all walked through it. And the white students were saying, the young people were saying, we can't help because we got a stupid mayor. That's what they were saying. I said, well, you got to vote him out off. And so then we walked on, and there was the black people just before we left the city. They were standing over there, and they was waving, scared, of course. I went over, they fed me. I said, don't worry about it. I said, he put his pants on the same way you do. And then we were, of course,
you were injured over there,
oh, you were then after we got to Forest City. got to Little Rock and had the demonstration and everything. I was coming back to Forest City and go to Sumter, Tennessee, because a white man and his two sons had jumped on a black woman and her two daughters up in Sumter, Tennessee. So I was going to meet Dick Gregory and Jim Bevan and all us going to meet up there. So as far as I was concerned, I had did what I had set out to do, and that was to break the chain of fear by doing that. And so I'm preparing. I'm there. I was going to spend another day or two at Forest City. And a preacher came to me and said, they want you to come around to the city hall. I said, who is they? He said, the White Citizen Council. I said, what do you want me to come around there for? I said, well, they want to get rid of the mail too. I said, well, I don't want to get rid of the mail. I ain't got no problem. I ain't got no problem with the mail. And the other thing that was amazing about that, the sheriff, who was a Caucasian, he's the kind that get along with black folks. I could always go to him and we'll sit down and talk. I mean, we would talk about whatever the problem is. So I wouldn't have to worry about, I let him know that we talk. This particular day, and I'm going to get back to that, this particular day, something told me, say, go around to the sheriff's office. So I learned how to follow the spirit. I ain't getting cut and everything. They tell me to go. I don't tell them to go around there. Look out of the way I come. You know what I mean? I don't leave with one Jonah in the belly of the whale incident. From then on, I'll go. You ain't got to ask me. Make me sit down. But anyway, so I'm following the spirit. I go down and go to the sheriff's office. And that's reflected on senior, the prosecuting attorney. They're sitting up there plotting on what laws they're going to charge me with breaking. Right. That's what they discussed. I walked through the door. The prosecuting attorney could have fainted. He said, we were just sitting here talking about you. I said, what? And I went on sit down in the chair next. I said, what y'all talking about? Well, we were talking about what laws we could do to lock you up. I said, well, then all you got to do is tell me what laws I'm doing, and I won't break them. Let me know. That's all I got to do. And so we talked about another 10 or 15 minutes. And I got up and told the sheriff I talked to him later. Gone, sheriff gone. And I left on a good note. Left on a good note. Okay. Man, the next morning, the Spirit told me, he said, go to City Hall. On my way to City Hall. I get to the City Hall's door, and there is a woman named Peggy Vitterto, Caucasian woman. She said, come here. She said, he's dead. I'm thinking she's saying that something happened to her husband, he done died because of me. Or, I said, who's dead? She said, Fletcher Long. And I know that we had been in a meeting that night. And I'm thinking, oh, this is his wife and she's coming to kill me. I said, no, I'm not coming out of there. She said, no, come here. She said, him. And she had a gold chain. And she gave me this gold chain. And there's a book out. If you go to the internet and when you Google Last Sweet Willie Wine Washington, you'll see 6 or 7 Jet magazines I was in. You'll see books that was written by governors that I'm in. You'll also see a book that was written by C.E. Wright called One and Others. And that book is about Peggy Vitterto and also about me over in Forest City. So that's on the internet. You can find it.
That's under Sweet Willie Wine?
Lance Sweet Willie Wine Watson.
Lance?
Yeah,
Lance?
Google Lance Sweet Willie Wine Watson. And you'll see a whole list of stuff. Even they're saying I'm the most dangerous man in Memphis. I feel good about that. Later on, if I thought about it, he said Dr. King was the most dangerous man in America. And I said, I got the distinction of being the most dangerous man in Memphis. And it wasn't because of the fact that I was bad. It's because of what the truth in that carried.
Okay, now post Dr. Martin Luther King, we had a riot in Memphis after Dr. King was assassinated. And there, of course, were the city sort of like turned upside down after that. People started leaving the city, moving eastward, and there was a tremendous amount of change. But something else happened to Memphis. I've noticed that cities around the South where Dr. King visited, they all grew and prospered, but Memphis did not. So what do you see in that? Memphis stayed basically the same.
Yeah, well, I guess that would depend on what we'll call it prosper. We were led to believe because you didn't have black faces in white places that we wasn't going to make it in Bible. So that became the focus, trying to put black folks in this going on right today, in white places. Well, that was done, but then there was certain other things did not happen as well. And that goes back to the control of the economy, who's controlling the economy in that particular area, who's controlling the economy, period. Now, for social acceptance, that was done, okay, and then there was a minimum amount of power. You had more facade than black folks exerting real power, because the opposite happened. If at one time that we were own 49% of the businesses in Memphis, and now we own less than 1%, then what we did was, instead of progressing and bringing with us those valuables that we had in terms of economics and jobs and stuff that we were creating in businesses, all of that disappeared because we could go somewhere else. And going somewhere else, that was supposed to show that we done made it. I can go there now and not looking at why would you want to go there, keep the money in your own community, but going there and taking it other places and come on in and all of that. That's what we lost there. That's what we lost.
This is a final question.
Okay.
Just want to know, what do you think? Not what do you think. What should we be doing now to bring the change that we need here in Memphis, Tennessee?
Well, now that the world has changed the paradigm shift, we have to look at where this third world, which is what it is, which way it's headed, and what is going to be established as it relates to the changing paradigm. When I say we talking about African American people. We have been marginalized because there's no need, and there's going to be very little need for others because of transhumanism, robots, and etc. Because that's where it's all going to be now in that direction. Of course, you can look at what is happening now all across the North American Union or the United States. In terms of, we see that Detroit is changing. Detroit is going to be agriculture. We're going to grow food and everything up in Detroit. You see what they're doing, how they're getting the people out of there. I got the United States Army, the Department of Defense manual, which is this stick, tells you about reselling it and installing it other people. Okay. So now we can see people are coming here from all over, not only just from the country, but all over the world now is coming here. Okay. One young lady who ran for office, dad is Iranian and mom is black. Okay. You see what I'm saying? The trend now is, and what they're doing is that they're going to continue to reduce the need for the black man. Okay, the black woman will become, based on her role, the mother of all mankind. She will become the one that will produce the hybrid. Okay, whatever the race is.
Right.
Okay, she will produce that hybrid. Okay, so therefore, if the black race is killing, we have killed 14 or 15 million African American babies since 65. So that's when our population is growing. I was reading the other day, it said birth rates are down. So that means their campaign of eugenics and reducing the population is working. Okay. Then the question becomes, and I can remember reading 2 or 3 years ago, saying that African American will be on the bottom. Okay. So now, and then Caucasians, don't you think they realize there's no need for them as well? Okay. Now, if we is not careful, let me just give you what I know. If we're not careful, we're going to be used as cannon fodder. And the cannon fodder will be, all they got to do is 3 things. 1, let South Korea or them do it themselves, knock out the electrical grid. Your food, swipe of a card. You see what I'm saying? Swipe of a card. Cashless society. But if you knock out the grid, what you're going to get, you ain't going to get nothing. Now, on the shelf of the grocery store, there's only 3 days of groceries. Only 3.
Right.
According to the military, after 5 days, usually cannibalism breaks out. I've never read a story that was an airplane crash and somebody, this man started eating up the people. And the people said, damn, the body wasn't even cold from the crash, he just started eating already. I mean, but that's what but so I'm saying cannibalism set in. And I was listening as I walked the street and talking to young people, to talk to people, to see where their heads and what's going on. because each person is a reflection of some environment or whatever. And I was talking to a young lady, and she was sitting on the porch, and she said that somebody broke in her house. No. That was another situation. Somebody did break her house. No, this person that told me people on the stove on McLemore, right there by the fire department. She was telling me, she said her daughter's house was broke in, and the only thing they got out of there was food.
Okay.
Young people breaking in. Okay. You got 6 million young people out here that do not have family ties. 6 million. Okay, so you know what they're going to do. They are going to be the ones that when it comes like Katrina,
Right.
Disaster, man-made or natural, we know what they're going to do because they don't have any discipline. They've been programmed to do what they're doing. They're programmed without thinking of the consequences of their actions.
Right.
Because you can look what they're doing, cutting their mama's face off with hatchet.
Right.
You know that, so you know they've been desensitized and dehumanized.
Right.
Okay, so we know that they're going to be the one. See, and what they're supposed to do is, they're the Caucasians who are preparing. Then they're going to have to use up all their bullets based on the race wise.
Right.
Then what's left? Then the troops from the other countries, they'll come and do the mop up and all the other stuff that we got here. So, but that's what it looks like. But until that point, we got to do everything we can along the way to slow up, detain, or even maybe change. We don't know, but we know if we don't do what we can do and should do, that it won't do anything but what the plans are.
Well, I want to thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Again, I'm Talut, El-Amin, and Sweet Willie Wine. Pleasure. And we're going to wrap up this interview here at Judge Joe Brown for District Attorney Headquarters. Again, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, everybody.